Hello, everybody. Welcome to Raising Multilinguals Live. My name is Tetsu Young from Ask Tetsu.
And my name is Ute Lima-Garibold from Ute's International Lounge. Hello, everyone.
Hello and welcome. And I'm Rita Rosenbach from multilingualparenting.com.
Oh, hang on. Well, let me introduce our very special guest. It's the first time we do this like super early for me. Maybe I'm the only one who's like kind of hyper. I got my dose of coffee. It's it's actually 7 a.m., which is not really that early, but for me, it actually is. But it's late at night for Dr. Liquan Liu, our special guest today. Dr. Liu is a lecturer in psychological sciences. He works at the Babylab Kingswood. I love that name. I love that name. With collaborations with researchers from the School of Psychology at MARCS Institute and overseas scholars. So thank you for taking the time, Dr. Liu. I know you allow me to call you Li Chuan, so thank you for taking the time today. Before anything, let's kick it off with a little background, some introduction of yourself, please. Your relationship with languages, your research, all of that jazz. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to start. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, I'm really honored and glad to be here. Okay, so who am I? My life is exactly like the 1998 Jackie Chan movie called Who Am I? My name is Li Chuan. I grew up in Shanghai, had my PhD at Utrecht Institute of Linguistics, and currently I'm working at Western Sydney University. I speak several languages, but not a single one well enough. I do hope that those who are listening right now can understand me through my accented English, learned cumulatively somehow from somewhere. Unlike my colleagues and encounters whose talent, wisdom, and diligence I adore very much, I feel like I am a wanderer, maybe an Amazon half naked, walking in the jungle of knowledge, poking and trying to understand humans. And in my research area, early childhood development. And in the exploration of this field, language development and multilingualism in infancy are among the research topics I study the most.
Well, as you finish that little sentence, we got a like. So shout out to everybody who's watching us today on Facebook, YouTube, and for the first time on Twitter. So if you do see us on Twitter, give us a little tweet and say hello. So we've got people from around the world watching us. This is unfortunately the only time that really fit Li Chuan's time zone and our time zone. So once again, we're trying to reach as many people as possible and spread our message. Oh, so that was indeed the most unique introduction I think we've had so far. So another like for you. So let's jump into the topic today. It's bilingualism in infancy and early childhood. So what can you tell us, I guess, in a general sense for now, how babies acquire languages versus older kids, even adults? Ooh, general threads, I guess.
Yeah, several things. First, babies are queens and kings of learning. Compared to us adults, they learn language so seamlessly, effortlessly, right? They somewhat like computers. They seem to be quite efficient at tracking statistical information in the input. And second, infancy is the golden age of learning. People often say that the first 1,000 days are crucial for child development. If you see the neurodevelopmental patterns, it seems to be the case indeed. Our brains do develop drastically in early childhood. On the other hand, we adults have a brain ready to deteriorate.
Don't be so dark.
It's okay. Third, babies are so eager, so motivated to learn. Perhaps it's the survival of the fittest. They want to understand the world they're living in. We adults often get stuck at what we already know, unwilling to change what we think or believe is true. We often find it difficult to learn a new language, but babies are not like that. They are absorbing information all the time, love their spirit. Having said that, I would guess you would agree with me in saying that there are constraints for babies to learn. And one of them lies in mobility. They rely on us to see the world. So the environment and what we bring them become very important. Things like the pandemic, for example, are not helping. While older kids can still learn from, say, screen media, young kids, young babies do not learn from these media efficiently. The limitation of this mobility and consequently environmental complexity, diversity, constrains early language learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Whenever people talk to me about the early development, I always like to that little video that I saw. I remember about the early development of the brain, like the first 3 years. So you mentioned 1,000 days. That's great. That explosion of synapse connections,
Yes,
right? And then what's it called? The pruning.
After.
Correct. Yeah, that's just fascinating stuff. I believe it was just overall development, but not specific to language learning. But it's the first time I think I hear somebody really discuss it in the context of language learning. So I'm very, very interested in what else you have prepared for us today. So you mentioned that kids raised in more than one language are better at other skills also. So once again, we're going to tie back to general development, and that includes music. So what is the common thread that ties everything together here?
Right. So for this question, I would actually go a little bit conservative. So these days, we see a lot of findings reporting differences between monolingual and multilingual kids in the language domains, such as speech perception, word learning, and grammatical learning, and beyond the language domain, such as general auditory perception, which we can include music, but also cognitive functions, social cultural development, etc., etc. I actually have done some research in this field too. But I think we need to be a little bit cautious here when talking about other skills, cross-domain skills. One example comes from cognition and specifically the debate in executive function. So previously, it was argued that for anyone who speaks multiple languages, we must suppress other languages when saying the target language. This all happens in the brain, but this mental exercise makes multilingual speakers better and cognitive inhibition and control. However, in the recent decade, a number of recent meta-analyses, collections of previous relevant studies, show that this better at other skills effect, at least for cognitive functions, may be debatable. Actually, different meta-analyses studies report different outcomes. Some agree, some disagree. So there's an ongoing debate over here. Debates also happen in senior populations, such as dementia studies. Previously, some studies report that multilingualism or active use of multiple languages can delay the onset of dementia. Recent meta-analyses seem to suggest that this is also debatable. Although there may be such an effect, multilingualism may not be the reason. Other factors, such as level of education, may play a more important role. Having said that, not a lot of meta-analyses looked intensively into studies with young multilingual children and with the benefits of bilingualism or multilingualism across domains, such as general auditory perception. Summarizing literature in this age range, say from birth to year 3, the keyword here to describe the differences between the monolinguals and multilinguals across studies would be, I think, flexibility. So multilingual children seem to be more flexible in their perception of this world, and that manifests in other areas in across domains. And I believe this cautious interpretation should be okay, at least for me. In some, there are indications, still, I would say that there are indications showing that multilinguals are better in some other skills and have lifelong benefits. But we cannot be entirely sure, and more studies are needed. Even so, the knowledge gain among multilinguals is real. Yeah.
So did I catch you correctly in it's not necessarily just auditory, right? you mentioned lots of cognitive skills, and anything that's related would have this advantage.
Right. So, for example, there are studies who showed the difference between monolinguals and multilingual children, or young kids, or infants across in the cognitive domain. For example, such as attention, working memory, and recognition. In the sensory domain, such as acoustic sensitivity. In the social communication and preferences, such as detecting speaker's intention, and also in the brain structure, such as white matter and gray matter development. So there are differences reported across domains, not just restricted to linguistics. Yes.
So I bring this up because I've always thought we're going to come back a little bit to that interesting question earlier about the explosion of synapses and then the pruning process. And I always thought the ability to hear and distinguish different sounds correctly within the language that you're exposed to, and then later when you start to have difficulty hearing the intricacies in other languages, does that have to do with this process of brain development and the pruning? Like, it's kind of like you lose the ability
Yes.
to clearly hear
Yes.
other.
Yes, I think your brief summary is actually very correct, right? So,
Really?
so
Wow.
yeah, phonological development is phonemic development. They occur in a relatively earlier age. By the end of the first year, for example, this is already kind of stabilized or formed, at least in the brain. Well, it's not that surprising if you think about it. Kids, if you don't have a solid, relatively solid, let's say, perceptual system, how can you build up your linguistic skills? You need to understand the sounds, and then you can learn the native words, lexicon, grammar, elocutionary cues, language use, etc., etc. So, yeah, so the answer would be yes. And then multilingual infants in this area, in this area of literature, you often see that multilingual infants are more sensitive in non-native speech perception. So especially the speech that does not occur in their native language, that is actually a very it's actually counter optimal use or learning of that language, right? So you keep the sensitivity open for other languages. You keep the windows, the doors open. That also reflects what I said about flexibility, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a little overwhelmed with, like, it sounds too simple to be so generally true. I really like the idea. I don't think I've ever delved really deeply into the literature to find all the scientific evidence. But to hear it from you, reassures me a lot about this idea of just the general brain development and really connecting that to auditory capacity, I guess.
Yeah. I can give you an example. For example, Garcia Ciela in 2011 paper, what they found is that bilingual infants' neural responses of native contrast at 10 to 12 months resemble those of monolinguals at 7 months. But Petito and colleagues in another paper next year showed that at 10 to 12 months, bilingual infants' neural responses of non-native speech were greater than those of monolinguals in the left inferior frontal cortex. What that means is that there is a cost. Yes, bilinguals, they keep the window open. Maybe they keep the time window open for learning, for language learning or speech learning or for phonemic learning for a longer period of time. But it's not without cost, because the native ones, as you can see, are also delayed a little bit. Because that opening window is important to understand this world, what's going on. There are more than one language, but it affects a little bit of the native language acquisition too. But of course, in the long-term process of language learning, this is like, it's nothing. It's, what's the English word? It's a cost that we can pay, something like that. Yeah.
Maybe can I add something, because what came up now is also this in the background. I don't want to get into detail about this because it's very controversial. It's this critical period, right, during the first years, where maybe the use of critical would be nicer to be replaced with optimal in certain regards instead of critical, because critical, what then parents often perceive by this is, okay, if I don't speak my 5 languages with my 3-year-old child, it's over. It will never happen again. And this is something that I think we should set right, that it is optimal, but it's not lost if you cannot manage within the first 3 years, where the brain and the connections and the synapses are from, and the pruning starts, where then actually what you need is consolidated, but still can be built up later on, right? So
I agree with you completely. I think Janet Work and Susan Curtin had a paper, so it's a 15 paper on the critical/optimal period. They actually, just like what you said, they actually categorize the developmental patterns in as optimal period rather than critical, meaning it's elastic. You don't need to think of it as a rigid time frame after which it's just, you still can learn, it's just harder. They have a recent development on that theory, by the way, in which they create multiple layers of optimal periods. I don't know if you have seen that one, which is quite fascinating, right? And also, I believe Patricia Kuh, also in Patricia Kuh's theoretical model, bilingualism, the effect of bilingualism, it can also be incorporated. So the so-called more optimal in the optimal period seems to be the case for the bilingual brain or the multilingual brain at an early age.
Yes, absolutely. And that this optimal can be optimal on different levels. You mentioned the phonological or phonemic level that is very easier for very young children and becomes increasingly more difficult as far as they grow up. But then the other parts, the morphological, syntactical, and lexical, it's easier for older children or older learners. But I'm digressing, so sorry.
No, I once again agree with you completely. I read the paper which creates multiple models. I had a study in which I tested not only the sound part, but also the word part. For example, I tested the difference between monolinguals and bilingual kids on word learning, but the words are non-native words. So I tested Dutch infants learning of Mandarin words, and the finding is that it does seem that I didn't. The finding is that the bilinguals are not delayed so they keep the same pace as monolinguals. However, Jessica Hay did a similar study and found that bilinguals are more. They also keep the word learning more open. So basically, it's the same story with sounds, but they can be applied to non-native word learning as well. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yes.
Nice. Now, since we got into some controversial stuff, let me ask a question. This is something my mother always talked about when I was younger. I mean, I grew up with various languages, and she would tell me about different languages occupying different areas on the auditory spectrum. And she would say, if you can cover languages that cover a wider range, for example, Japanese is on a relatively low auditory range, whereas British English, I think, is relatively high. If you cover different areas and sort of cover, the wider you can cover in frequency, the better your ears stay open, so to speak, to other languages. This is clearly not the only thing that contributes to the plasticity, I guess, of the hearing for children learning more than one language. But would you do you say that this is a good contributing factor, or do you simply don't think this is?
I think we don't need to we don't need to get tangle into the terminology or definition, but I do believe your mother's idea is right. For example, let's say in Japan, we have you will never hear me disagreeing with people from my culture background, by the way. So if you go to the Japan, if you see in Japanese, the people who speak Japanese only it's difficult for them to distinguish the English la and ra. Right, the
L and
R
R,
and L, exactly. So if in your mom's terms, if you are learning Japanese and English at the same time, then you will get the advantage of being able to distinguish them. Of course, different languages have different phonetics, phonology, etc., etc. The sound is never entirely the same, right? Some are rounder. Anyways, but yes, at least we agree on something. If you learn more languages, it covers more.
Okay. So yeah, I think Patricia Kuhl's video, that super famous video, The Linguistic Genius of Babies, had this little discussion, and yeah, I would distinguish that between what my mother says, in that that is really about the intricacies of the pronunciations of different sounds in a given language. So the more you cover, the more your ears are sensitive to the intricacies of different languages. And that, I guess, yeah. So what she says is part of that in terms of the pitch of a language. But yeah, I'm glad that it's not refuted, I guess, in a sense. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think, okay, to be honest, I never see the series as conflicting with each other. I always see things to integrate, because these great minds, they have their own thinking, and they have their, what do you call it, essentials, like underlying mechanisms and stuff like that. We can always look at them integrately, put them together and see, okay, what they are thinking. In the end, it could be something that's, it's combining everything, which is kind of how brain works, even though we can never tell exactly how.
We always, I guess science requires us to sort of simplify the systems in order to understand it well, but it's never simple. It's always multifactorial. One thing affects another. So okay, all right. Let me sort of zoom out a little bit, because we've been talking about how earlier is better. I mean, that's sort of the general sense of where we're going. Are we able to sort of pinpoint a little more what exactly is this better thing? Are things more easily retained? Is this more natural speech?
Yeah. Okay. So I would go. Okay. So if you ask, for example, what is true? Is it true about the earlier the better? I would be a bold here then now, not conservative, and say that yes, right. So it applies to all aspects of language learning, and that is exactly what you said earlier on about this neurodevelopment in general, right? Not just about language now. We talked about child learning capacities, capabilities. The observations indicate that it would be a pity not to take advantage of the baby's natural learning ability and their will of knowledge gain. So yes, I would say the earlier the better. Now, some examples I would like to share, although more evidence, more studies are needed in this area, come from adoption research. I don't know if you have heard of it. American English speaking children, I think, or Canadian English, I can't remember English speaking children who were adopted from China, and Dutch speaking adults who were adopted from Korea. So these subjects were tested on their perception of their birth language. So not English, not Dutch, but Chinese or Korean. And these subjects had no prior knowledge of these birth languages, by the way. So findings showed that behavior and neural traces of these birth languages, right? So some were, so the key, and also these some I think some subjects were adopted very early as 6 months after birth. So if this is true, it shows the power of early language exposure, even before our babies can talk, even before the babbling stage for some babies. So, well, of course, this may open a whole lot of new possibilities for human learning in the future when we are more scientifically, technologically advanced. But yeah, I would say that for multilingual exposure, the earlier, the better in general. Yes.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
I've got so many polyglot friends who maybe I'll just take a devil's advocate stance. You know, they always tell me, oh, you can learn languages at any age, which I generally agree. And
Yes.
they would say, you know, there's studies that show that adults learn faster than kids, which I would say, you know, you have your experience, you have knowledge, information that you can, you know, base your learning on. So in that sense, yeah, I generally agree. But when it comes to accent, that's where I go, you got to be super, 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 super motivated and have a talent, I think, for it to, you know, because all these friends who can speak 20, 30, 40 languages, they have an accent. So is that something that you would say is like a key?
Right. I need a group. So this is the place that I'm dare not to step too deep into.
Okay.
I need the what do you call it, the wisdom in the room right now. I would say. What do you think about this
Well,
eccentric development?
yeah, well, I have a very clear opinion about accents. So it's a general acceptance towards accent that are like fingerprints, etc. But Tetsu, if you think about opera singers or singers in general who sing in another language, especially this combination of singing and accents seems to be a great way to overcome an accent if you want, if you see it as something negative, which I personally don't, or in copying the other way of pronouncing words in a certain setting. So in a song, for example, that seems to facilitate somehow to adhere to the other way of saying things and articulating things. But I think, like you said, it requires a bit more work, but it's not impossible if you think about opera singers who learn to sing in another language and they are adults. And
it's, I would also like to add that I appreciate your question about accents, but it's, to me, that always becomes a discussion about what we're lacking, that you do not have, when the real value is being able to communicate in how many ever languages. So we need to be very careful when we speak about accents and put the value on accents, because
absolutely,
to me the phrase saying that you should respect someone who speaks with an accent because they probably know one more language than you do, that is something we need to kind of push forward more than anything else.
100%.
That's so interesting. That's a very interesting. So that's not already not just about how accent is formed and whether or not we can practice or we can try to learn the certain accent, but also it comes to your personal identity, who you are, respect. I really like that idea. That's language, by all means, is a tool of communication, right? So why, like, what's wrong with accents? Indeed, yes.
Yes.
We all the four of us speak English. Is not the native language for any one of us. We all speak with accents.
Yes, more or less. And may I just share a little comment from the audience? So there's Kathy who says accents are very important if they shouldn't be, but yeah, they are important. I think she is referring here to language hierarchies, about language biases that happen when someone opens the mouth and talks, and maybe it's not matching your exterior appearance or the expectation of your interlocutor. So
Absolutely,
Yes,
that is the reality. But
yes, absolutely.
as kind of proponents of a more open-minded thinking about it, I think we should never, as a group, go down that route.
No,
We should try
absolutely.
to counterbalance these opinions, which in my own opinion are not good for multilingual society as well.
No, absolutely. And may I just close this discussion about accents with a comment from Elizabeth Garcia Gonzalez. Native speakers also speak with an accent.
Indeed.
Yes.
So we all have, north,
Hi,
south,
Ellie.
east,
I'm
west.
sorry. I know her.
Oh, wow.
Oh, bless.
That's nice. Oh.
Completely agree with you. Yes, Ellie. Hi. Yes. That's actually what I wanted to say, right? American English is an accent. Yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah.
So native accent really is just a convention of, most people of this country would speak this language. It's never about good or bad, or it's just a characteristic, right?
Yes, it's passing the surface level and reach the meaningful level. That is, yeah.
There you go. All right. Let's already 32 minutes past. Okay,
let's crawl out of that rabbit hole.
Indeed.
Okay.
But I do still want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of learning. I'm sure we've not really explored it fully yet. We've talked about many advantages. I don't know if there's more. We can also talk about possibly negative aspects to learning more than one language in early life. I'll let you dig in.
Yeah. So first of all, I think people, especially people in academia, gradually move away from the discussion between advantages and disadvantages. It sounds like monolinguals are disadvantaged. So people here are mostly more talking about, like, for example, let's say differences. And if we do differences, there may be we can have like 3 broad levels. The first level is language per se. So it is, okay, everyone can learn a new language at any age, yes, but it's kind of difficult for us to master a language. Yes, we use Duolingo, but not as consistent or motivated as children using the environment learning languages early in life. So yes, so that's the first level. The first advantage or the first difference, let's say. The second level is language adjacent information. Language is a tool of communication. It contains new information about culture and the worldviews as well, right? So it can even include experience with a new race for some children. Not everywhere is multilingual or multicultural. These experiences will always be helpful for kids. I grew up in a monolingual and also a more unicultural. So that actually makes it difficult for me to have a race perception. Like, so there's other race effect. Difficult to disambiguate 2 faces from a race that is not Asian, for example. But if I grew up and talked in a multicultural society, things might change, right? So that would be another thing to think about, the addition that's not language but adjacent to it. The third level would be the language-induced functions. Learning new information just stimulates early neurodevelopment and cognitive development and everything that we just mentioned. Apart from this, I would advise that we do not think too much of the side effects or advantages about multilingualism, but focus on providing children with great language environments and opportunities for learning. Any positive side effects can be considered as an extra. Having the opportunity to be able to learn and speak multiple languages and understand more than one social cultural norms is already a great advantage by itself, to be honest. As for the disadvantage, I wouldn't think of any. Maybe the other side of the flexibility that I mentioned, it's kind of temporary. Like you are more sensitive to the non-native speech input, for example, which has a slightly longer time frame. But I don't really think that it's a disadvantage. Yeah, to me, it's just good. Yeah.
I like the way that you speak about differences, because this is what it is. It's just a difference, and one feature might be an advantage in one situation, while it might be a disadvantage in another. So it's two sides to the story. So I absolutely love your idea of creating the optimal environment, and that doesn't only go for bilingual children, also for monolingual children. And they are different because what they need support with and what kind of is good for their development is not the same. So it's a difference, that's all. And in some cases plus, some cases minus.
I definitely agree that we should never really be comparing in this sense of plus, minus, good, bad, black, white. It's always different is good. It's much more inclusive in terms of how we talk. So agree. Now that said, if we want to think about potential reasons not to start early for kids, there are things that are said. For example, do kids get confused when they learn many languages at once? Is that something that is validated? Is that something that could be a reason not to start too early?
Oh, that's a great question. People always, yes, it's really good that you mentioned that. Ellie, the previous person that to make a note, actually is studying that at the moment, I believe. So correct me if I'm wrong, Ellie. So basically, for example, multilingual kids do code switching a lot. But some people see it as a negative aspect of it, but it doesn't seem to be like that. I think scientifically, kids just do code switch, and they will overcome it after a period of time, they pass it. And even if they do code switch, it's not a big deal. We also code switch by ourselves.
That's right.
Like we speak, right? Yeah. So it's
if I'm
really
delayed, I'm 47 years delayed.
Yes, not negative. No, it's good. All good, I think.
Well, if I may bring up a little comment from Katie, says the first years of schooling can be hard for some children. I don't know, maybe not, but she adds with, but they catch up eventually. So
again, to me, I would prefer not speaking about catch up, because it's different trajectories going in at a different pace, and they shouldn't be compared. So catch up is not really the word. It's just that when the trajectory is different.
Trajectory is different. Yeah, indeed.
It's maybe a word that is used based on the fact that the children are still assessed, comparing them to monolingual children. But if that would shift, which is a wish that we all have, I think, that you don't compare apples with pears, but apples with apples and pears with pears, if this is possible. But yes.
Yes, and Katie mentioned something very important too, which is correct. So there are a number of studies done from a lot of places, right? So in a place, I can't remember exactly when, I should be very familiar with that, but what they found is that multilingual kids do not, in that place, the bilinguals or the multilinguals are not as good as the monolinguals, but then it seems to be related to the socioeconomic status as well. So there's always some additional factors that's playing the role. So if you have the same, exactly the same factor going on in the same condition, maybe things will be different. So whenever we, just as what Rita says, when we look into these kind of questions, we need to take a more comprehensive picture to understand what's going on. Basically, that's what I want. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess if we all lived in a lab and all lived under controlled environments, maybe we'll find out the answer definitively. But otherwise, we do live in a very complex world. So many factors come into play, and we are influenced by so many things, which is a great thing. So it's the best thing, I think, when we have this diversity.
Yes, and may I just quote Anna P. Thank you, Anna. Apples and pear will both eventually ripen, even if not at the same time. And actually, yes, when they're 18, you don't even think about that anymore because you know that they all come out fine. So thank you for that one, just to round up that part.
That is pretty true, but we still need to, you know, give the sun, give the water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Quoting Colin Baker, yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Where are we with the questions? We've got. I do see that we've gotten quite a lot of comments throughout the discussion so far. Definitely a shout out to everybody who's watching us so early in my neck of the woods, so late in the area where Liquan is. But thank you to everybody who's watching on Facebook, YouTube, and for the first time on Twitter today. So once again,
yes,
if you're watching this on Twitter, do go right on ahead and tweet this out, say hello.
Yes. May I quote Elizabeth once more? She had left a nice comment that repeats a bit what we were saying now. I think we need to stress that the majority of people in this world are multilingual. So seeing them as divergence from the norm is a wrong assumption. Mm-hmm. We couldn't agree more. Monolingual children are not a homogeneous group either. So learning trajectories are different for all.
That's right.
Sums it up nicely. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Indeed. I mean, language is one aspect. There you go. There are so many things. So, all right. So thank you once again for everybody who's tuned in. We will be starting to think about wrapping up. If you have more questions, now's the time. Do put it in the comments so for us to pick up. Otherwise, Liquan, anything you want to really emphasize or re-emphasize as a big overarching message to parents when it comes to raising multiple languages? What are the things to stress or
I do have 2 points, mm-hmm. but it may sound a bit surprising because neither is purely about language learning or multilingual learning. So first point, raising a bilingual, multilingual child is a blessing, right? So just as what Ellie said, in this world, humans become the problem. Between human and the environment, we create the climate issues. In between humans, people often they stop understanding each other or stop trying to understand each other or deliberately choose not to do so for self-gaining purposes. If you recall Michael Jackson, okay, I'm older, we need to heal the world to make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. Right?
Will you sing that?
No. Okay. Next time. Raising a multilingual child is one way going forward. It brings more understanding, not only on a language level, but also on a social cultural level. Yeah. Second, and I'm sorry that this point may sound a bit tacky, in the end, as a tool of communication, language or languages do not matter. People who speak them matter. We shout, our kids shout. We love, our kids love. So we get back to the beginning of this chat. Who am I, right? So parents, caretakers, who we are more important than languages or perhaps anything else. We are the role models and the most important factor, maybe not in language learning because there's also a social environment, but definitely in child development, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My goodness, should we develop on that? Wow, I would go on for another 2 hours. I sort of lose my words, but I will put on somebody else's words. Beautifully put.
Yes.
Beautifully put.
Exactly.
Really, all three of us, we talk about this so much. This multilingual parenting. It's so much more about the parenting than just the language part. So I completely agree with you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Anna. Yeah, but mostly thank you for raising a multilingual child. Really, thank you for doing this. Yes.
Indeed. I mean, I don't want to do a little plug on my channel, but that's what I put in in the description. I give tips and tricks based on my experience raising multilingual children, in order for all the multilingual kids to create a better world. That's really my ending message on my channel. So it's just a tool, like you say, and I happen to specialize on that part of the tool, but it's to create a better world with open-minded kids, global kids. That's what I'm aiming for. So thank you for that. Any other comments we want to highlight? Any other words from my co-hosts?
I can just thank you so much for your joining us today. It was I love the discussion, and it always kind of reassures me and my co-host as well that we are doing the right thing by bringing this abundance of information from the academia out to the parents, so they can do exactly what you say, be the role models, raising their children to become more open-minded through bilingualism and other means. But yeah, thank you very much, Liquan.
Yes.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you very much also from me. I don't know what else to add. A part of, going ahead from what you just shared with us during this, not even an hour, but that is very encouraging for many, many parents who are starting on this journey and who are on the journey and who are constantly worrying or asking themselves, am I doing it right? And you are. So whatever we do, as you said, yes, it's a lot about parenting and being the right sparring partner for our children somehow, right? To be there and support them with everything. So there were some comments. Tetsu, which one would you like to share?
Well, before we transition to the next session, let's feature the comments that we've got. Lots of great, excellent points from Margaret. Really, I mean, there's no Raising Multilinguals Live without our audience. So we really appreciate you guys coming in and contributing to our shows. Next one is from Andrea. That is really great because it is our heritage that we are giving our kids. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's really nice too. Yes. Margaret says again, as a mother and now grandmother, we continue on. We're just passing it along. Thank you again. Thank you. We cannot stress it enough.
Thank you.
This one says, I'm shocked that people don't teach kids keep preaching. Well, I mean, language, we must emphasize that language is one tool. There are many ways to raise great kids. So obviously, but we as preachers of this language world, we obviously want more people to bring up kids that are multilingual, multicultural. But yeah, there are other ways also, of course. All right, so let's put up the last one here.
I think you can start creating a fan club now.
Yes,
that's right. Just say that Dr. Liquan Liu is one of the most talented researchers I've ever met. Well. And he's fully devoted to understanding bilingualism. Thank you, Heart and Great Mind. So wonderful to have him here today. It has been a tremendous honor for us. Thank you once again for taking the time. It's so late in your neck of the woods.
Yes, I'll go back to.
We're gonna have to take you, get you back some time for your sleep. But just before that, I will have Rita introduce our next special guest. So please bear with us a second here. This is our next guest coming up. Liquan again. Hang on. There you go.
There we go.
It is her study, the study. Okay, so ask her about the multilingual kids vocabulary development. That's exactly what it's Erica's.
Surprise!
Surprise! I was going to say that we have touched on many of the topics of the next session, what to expect when your child is developing bilingual, and we have the great honor of having Dr. Erika Hoff from the Florida Atlantic University in the US, where she's a professor of psychology. Her research addresses, as we said, many facets of childhood bilingualism, including the effects of different socioeconomic backgrounds and levels of exposure, and what that means for becoming bilingual. She is the main investigator on a long-running study of Spanish-English bilingual development, funded by the US-based National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. She's the author of the textbook Language Development, and the author of several articles and chapters on the topic, and she's edited a lot of books. So she's a font of all knowledge when it comes to early childhood language development. So make sure you're there and ask your questions. Another interesting episode coming up.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know one person who's really excited to see her next time.
She is the best, one of the best. Okay, maybe not the best, but she's
really, I
love her work. I love her work so much. You really need to ask her about this mono versus multilingual developmental path thingy. She knows a lot. I'm sorry, I'm excited. I will come. Wow, you are great. I mean, you get these people. Wow.
Well, we got you, right?
No. That's different. Yeah.
So once again, shout out to everybody who's joined us today. Thank you so much. And I think we've already promoted the next session very well through Liquan's excitement.
Very genuinely.
Very genuine indeed. So don't miss the next session. It is on December 7th at our normal time, which is a very difficult time for Liquan, I understand, but it's 1 p.m. New York, 6 p.m. London, and 7 p.m. Paris time. Okay, so just before we leave, I would like to say thank you once again to Liquan. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Thank you to my co-hosts. And one last little request to Liquan before we end the broadcast. I have a comment here from from Anna. She says, I wonder if you could write in the comments some of these famous studies that you mentioned. Is it okay if we trouble you to just put in some of the key studies after
the session?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Maybe I can sleep first and then
of course
wake up and do it. And by the way, one of them will be from Erika Hoff.
Fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. We'll
you.
see you on December 7th with Erika Hoff. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Dankeschön. Grazie mille.
Kiitos paljon. Nähdään taas. See you soon.
Volgende keer.
Kahden viikon
De volgende
kuluttua.
keer.
Hei hei.
Inderdaad.